Amen. I want to ask if anybody has any questions. So we can begin with a little question and answer session, basically, if people have got any questions on any reasonable subject. Is this your question?
Can you go over, I know you were talking and discussing some stuff at lunch, the last, in today's sermon about the harvest at the loud cry. And it was in like the middle, I can't remember exactly, if I have a picture.
I think I understand what you're saying, about? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You want to just review those issues about those lines?
Yeah. Just a little fine tuning.
Sure. I was avoiding Brother Daniel's hand. Sorry?
That was going to be my question.
I think that was, that's what I think that was going to be your question. Anybody else got a question? No?
Think of one.
I always have that problem, you know, I really do. That they say, what's your question? I say, when I go home, I've got lots of them. When I come into a public setting, I don't want to ask any questions because I'll end up looking silly or my questions won't be very good.
On the board today, you developed the line, so there's a lot of activity and changes. As you do this, is it possible to put the completed line up there as you want us to see it?
Okay. So I'm going to draw the line, as I understand it, for the 144,000. Remember, this is a class, it's not some instruction that I'm giving. I don't think I can repeat it often enough. The agricultural cycle. So we have a field that is fallow, and then it's going to be ploughed, and then we're going to sow a seed, and then it's going to rain, and this former rain is going to turn this seed into a flower that is bearing fruit. Then the latter rain, which will bring this plant to maturity, and then the harvest. So has anybody got any questions on that? So have a think. You can go to Hosea. EA? Hosea, sorry, not Hosea. Hosea, chapter 10, and Jeremiah chapter 4, and Matthew chapter 13, and Mark chapter 4. I think they're the passages that I gave this morning. There are others, but these are the ones that you can clearly see this idea. I'll put 4:28. I think you have to go back 2 verses in Mark 4. So has everybody seen this study often enough that they're familiar with this? It's relatively straightforward. It does have a few tricks. Sometimes it's difficult to swap between the moral and the prophetic. Some people struggle with that, but it can be understood at that level. I've put the harvest as this period of time. Often we call that the binding off. It has some components in there. You're going to cut the plants down, you're going to bind them into bundles, put them into a barn of some type. So if we're happy with that line, then based upon that we can draw a line here at the end of the world. Deuteronomy. Sorry?
I don't know what you
Oh.
That was about eating earlier.
Oh, that was about eating.
Okay, sorry.
So I thought you were going to give me a verse that I didn't know. So I'm going to draw a line here, which I'm going to call the line of Adventism. I think when we do lines, we have to create those lines from Spirit of Prophecy quotes. Once we do that, then we can start making applications of those quotes in ways that the original author, Ellen White, didn't perhaps intend. I'm basing our ability to do that based upon the fact that this is a movement that's being set up by God. We have precedents to do this. Paul would do this, Miller would do this, Ellen White would do this, and so do we. So without getting into the discussion about who do we think we are, because that's the accusation that's going to be levelled against us, look at the illustrious names that we're comparing ourselves to. We've already discussed that, and people either accept that premise or they don't. We know most people don't. Many people have left just over this issue, this self-identification that we are prophets. People don't seem to have a problem that we're priests, and the reason that they don't is because they don't understand the implications of what it means to be a priest. And as soon as they do, perhaps as soon as you do, you might begin to shy away from that concept. Why do I say that? Because who are the only people that are allowed to be priests? In the Bible, you know, the Old Testament, New Testament model, who's the only people that can be priests? Levites. And it's not just Levites. I was trying to avoid your answers. Sorry. Sorry? Aaron. It's not even just Levites, it's the house of Aaron. So from the house of Aaron, you can go to Levites. And the problem that Jesus faces is what? He's from the wrong tribe. He's from the tribe of Judah. So it's against the law for him to be a priest. So the easy solution is they get the law and they just tear it up. You see this in Hebrews chapter 7. They just shred the law and they say, well, if that's a law, we don't like that law anymore, we'll change the law. So Paul's argument is that there is a necessity to change the law so that someone else can become a priest. And what's his argument to make Jesus a priest? What's the leverage he's going to use? Sorry?
Order of Melchizedek.
The order of Melchizedek. He's going to say, let's pull up Melchizedek. And what's Melchizedek's claim to be in this person? In England, we call it the claim to fame. What's his right? Abraham pays tithes to him. He was that priest even before Abraham did, so he had that right before. So that's not his claim. That's an argument against him. That's the whole point, that he doesn't have that. So he's going to say, I'm going to stand up as a priest, not on my father's righteousness or on my ancestral line, upon their righteousness. Upon whose authority does he become a priest? On his own. He says, I'm just going to stand up, and because I'm so good, I'm going to call myself a priest. And they're going to say, by what authority do you do that? Where's your resume, your CV, your credentials, your family tree? And he says, I don't need one because I am righteous all by myself. I don't need that pedigree. So Paul is going to use that very argument to say Jesus doesn't need a pedigree. He can just become a high priest all by himself through his own righteousness. Now, if you want to bring a modern day application to that, we know often we talk about it in the sense of the kings. Saul, Josiah, Ahaz, they all die as actors with the arrows of Islam. They're at 9/11 and they get replaced. So we know that they get replaced by this movement, and they're really the leaders, the spiritual leaders of this church, which are the equivalent of the priests because they receive tithes. And the question is, well, what authority do we take their place? Because they didn't lay hands on us. We haven't followed through that line. And our argument is what? We just tear up the paperwork. We don't like that law, so we create a new law. And so we then take on the status as priests based upon the same principles that Jesus did, which is what? Whose righteousness, Brother Theodore?
His righteousness.
Christ's righteousness.
No.
Our righteousness?
It's your own righteousness.
Yeah, but it's a different type of righteousness than what we normally think of.
We could argue the nuances
Yeah.
of what that means. When Christ gives you a garment, it's your garment, and that garment is righteousness for you to take care of. You take possession of it. It's yours. You have to take ownership of this. This is the combination of works and faith that people struggle with. So you can see pretty soon it becomes quite toxic to start talking about becoming priest. It's not this benign, we're all nice teachers. Then you get a secondary problem. What's the role of the high priest? Sorry? To make atonement for sin. And nobody's going to give you the authority to make atonement. And yet Christ is quite adamant about that concept or that idea about the role of his church here on earth. So all I'm saying is, if people want to attack us because we claim to be prophets, they don't realize what, when they've accepted this concept of priesthood and the implications of that, what it means to be a priest after the order of Melchizedek, which is what we're claiming. And by the way, if you think that's new, it's not. I don't have the video evidence of it, but I have on good authority that Elder Jeff said he, or the movement, is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. And people had a lot of problems when they heard that. So I'm not the first person to make this argument. Okay, so we're going to get this line that Ellen White's going to give us, and we're going to make some adjustments to it. So I'm giving you fair warning. So the line that she's going to give us is relatively straightforward. She's going to give us most of everything that we need. So we're going to begin at the time of the end, in 1798. So she'll give us 1798. What's the next major waymark she'll give us? 1844. So she's going to give us these two dates, and then what's the next major date she's going to give us? Oh, 1888, I'm going to skip. It would be 1888.
1863.
I'm going to go with Sunday law. So this is the Sunday law. Remember we spoke in early writings, it's an early book. It's not 1882 early writings, it's 1858, I think you told me. 57, 58, I think early, Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4. I think it's 57, 58. They don't know about a Sunday law that early on. The message is not matured enough, but they know a lot. And what they do know is this is the judgment of the dead. And this is the judgment of the living. But she's not going to tag it to the Sunday law. She's never going to tag it explicitly, in fact. But as we put line upon line or quote upon quote, you can see the inference of what she's teaching us here. So she's going to give us that. Then she's going to give us the close of probation, Daniel 12:1, and then the second advent. And that's about all she gives us. Now, if you think that's not a lot, think about our line. We've only actually really got 5 waymarks in our line. It's the same 5 waymarks that she's given to us. But what we're going to do is we're going to get this and truncate it and bring it forward. We're going to take equivalents of what those are in our own line. This is the line of God's church at the end of the world, the time of the end. We could argue that this is the line of Adventism from its very inception to the very end. Ellen White will tell us that Revelation 14, verse 6 and 7, could never have been preached before 1798. The fulfillment of it never happened. Because Revelation 14, verse 6 and 7 is dealing with what subject? What kind of judgment? No, it's not the executive judgment. This is the mistake that the Millerites made. The investigative judgment. So what you'll see is the first angel's message here, if I put it like an eye, the first angel's message is doing what? Where's this eye looking to? It's looking right here to the investigative judgment of the dead. That was the Millerite movement's message. And what angel is that? The first angel's message. That's why I contend that the first angel's message is Millerite history. After the first angel's message, another message comes, which is the third angel's message. The third angel's message came in 1844, and it's been running through history ever since. We did a study, I can't even remember if it was last Sabbath or maybe the Sabbath before, from Early Writings, page 277, which is the loud cry. Hopefully we remember that. Does everybody remember that at least vaguely? Yeah, hopefully we do. You pick it up in the first two paragraphs of Early Writings 277. And what she says is that this third angel's message is running through history, and at a certain moment, she says at the correct time or the right moment, an angel comes down from heaven. And the identification of that angel is the angel of Revelation 18. And when that angel comes down, it's going to bring power to the third angel and it's going to help this angel to swell to a loud cry. And what is the loud cry of the third angel? In fact, what is the third angel? What's its message? It has a number of components to it, but in this context, because we're talking about this judgment, you can see judgment here, what is it talking about? The third angel. What kind of a judgment? It's talking about the executive judgment. Once you get past this, because here it was the investigative judgment, I'll change that to investigative judgment. This one, let's not worry about that. Once the investigative judgment has done its work, it's leading you down to this event here. And I'll put the 7 plagues here. And it's identifying that at a certain time, after this empowerment, that the executive judgment's about to come, and it's warning the world not to receive a mark, or the mark of the beast, because if you do, you're going to receive punishment here. That's what the third angel is doing. It has this twofold work. First, to tell you there's an investigative judgment, and then to say, by the way, if you receive the mark of the beast, you're going to be punished here. As it runs through history, and this angel comes down, it comes to a point where you get a change. Because this third angel has been running through history, says, the close of probation is coming, it's coming, it's coming, but everybody wants to know when, how, where. It's at this point here that there's a big change. And at this moment, now the third angel says, remember this warning that I've been giving you all this time? Everything that I warned you about is now present truth. It's about to happen. And because no one's going to listen to the third angel, God's going to send another angel to help this angel, the third, swell into a loud cry. It's going to aid it. That is not enough power for the third angel. This angel, this glorious angel that comes down, even that is not enough. So God's going to send additional angels. And those additional angels are going to come down and they're going to aid this third angel And this is where we get this concept of the loud cry. Everything that I'm teaching, all of this, every Adventist knows. And what I mean by every Adventist knows, you could say, well, I don't know that and I've been Adventist 20 years. I'm saying this is not information that you would need to come to this movement to know and understand. You can just read this, it's just straight taken out the spirit of prophecy. I've not made any applications, twisted anything, made any kind of symbology, like saying towers or churches, or they're the towers of New York, or any kind of discussion, or arrows are a symbol of Islam. None of that. This is just straight spirit prophecy, and you can get this from Spirit of Prophecy, the Spirit of Prophecy set, volumes 1, 2, 3 and 4, which is the 1884 version. Great Controversy 1888, Great Controversy 1911. You'd struggle to get it out of early writings. You can get some. The one that would be missing would be that Sunday law. But we know about the Sunday law. So this is straight Spirit of Prophecy, no application. And then what she then does, I'm going to just put a layer on top of this. She's going to say that this history here is the history of the latter rain. And she says we're now in the history of the former rain. And when she says now, her beginning point really is 1844. Since 1844, we've been in the former rain. And we have no waymarks, no guidelines. I understand about 1888. 1888 came and went. There've been lots of troubles. She's not going to mark 4 generations, the progressive destruction, all of the things that we look for. It's just a linear history. But here, when you get to the latter rain, then the swelling comes, the loud cry comes, you come to the final events of Earth's history. So this is the complete line, if we want to say it in that framework that Brother Jim asked us. I'm going to make this even a more complete line. I'm going to get this and I'm going to squash it down into a really small piece of history. So from here to here, all of this is all of this. Yeah, take everything that's happening at the end of the world, I'm going to squash it down to here. And if we were to read Acts of the Apostles, page 55, maybe into 56, she's going to compare 2 histories. She's going to compare the history of the disciples, which I'm just going to symbolise by the cross, that history, New Testament history, the Gospels, Acts of the Apostles, with our history. And this is the time of the end history, or SDAs, or Laodicea, or the 7th and last church, however way we want to conceptualize it. And she's going to say this was the former rain. We understand that. That's Pentecost, essentially. All Christians know that. And this is the latter rain. And when she means latter rain, she means the end of the world, everything's finishing up. So she'll kind of say latter rain, harvest, just in one breath. She'll then say, by the way, this former rain was the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit's never left us. We know that. From Pentecost, it's been here on earth with us all through history. So this former rain ends up getting extended all the way through to the very end of the world. When she does this, she's not marking 1798. I'm marking that. She just says the end of the world in a generic sense. And I'm saying end of the world is time of the end. So she's got the beginning and the end. You could grow this out and go back to Eden if you wanted. If you wanted to keep on taking it out larger and larger. So I'm going to bring this all the way back down into this history. So former rain, latter rain. So we're looking at this history here. Former rain, latter rain. I just want to do one more thing with this. I want to take this line like this, it's this one here, I'm going to redraw it. So it's everything that I've done here. So I'm going to put the cross and I'll just put SDAs. Is everybody okay with that? What I'm doing? This was the history of the former reign. So I'm going to put former reign here. But again, we're not making any applications. It's straight out of the Spirit of Prophecy. Ellen White says this former reign here, this was Pentecost. But what comes before Pentecost? The 16th day of the first month, Resurrection Day. And when Christ resurrects, he meets his disciples in the upper room and he does what? He breathes upon them. And she says this was as the few drops before the plentiful rain. And if I were to ask you, using Spirit of Prophecy language, few drops, plentiful rain, what does that sound like? Sounds like former rain and latter rain. So I'm saying this here, Pentecost, was not the former rain. This is former rain history. This is latter rain history. But the former rain comes in two parts. Former rain, latter rain. You okay with that? 16th day, Pentecost. But Ellen White says the former rain and the latter rain. So what I want to do is, I want to say there's a connection here. Former rain, latter rain in this history. Then I want to say former rain and latter rain in this history. Can we see how we're spanning two histories in a certain way? We could call these fractals, if you like. Upon the testimony of two, a thing is established. So here at the end of the world, in this history here, what should we expect to see? We'd expect to see the same model, the former rain and the latter rain. And that's exactly what we have here, former rain, latter rain in this history. So this concept here of scaling a message out and bringing it back in, we should become familiar with. We should get used to this. I'm going to do exactly the same thing here. But I want to do it in a slightly different way, if you're okay with that. If you're okay with that model, I'm going to rub this one out here. And this one here is the story of rain. Now I want to do a story of the second angel. If I was going to do a story of the second angel, what history would I have to begin in? Why Millerite?
Because the first and the second arrived at the same time.
Because the first angel's message, Ellen White is very specific, could only come in 1798. Why? Why could it only come in 1798?
Because Paul says that nobody should preach of the second coming until the man of sin be revealed.
So Paul says no one can preach the second coming. And Ellen White's going to attach the first angel's message with the second coming. The Millerites did that in an incorrect way. But they were I'm not addressing that, but they did it in a fairly reasonable way. So I'm going to say this is the hour. The hour of his judgment is come. This hour, his judgment is come. We're in this history. We could argue that the hour is here, if you wanted to. So the first angel's message has to arrive in this history. So I'm going to do a line for the second angel. And I want to just do this simply. I'm going to say that the second angel came down in this history. So I'll put second here. Second angel came down. This is the Millerite history. And this is, I'm going to now call this our history. History is 144,000. Does the second angel come down in our history? Yeah? We know it does. So this is Revelation, what? 14. and this is Revelation 18. Revelation 14, Revelation 18. So, this is the story of rain, this is the story of the second angel. So, what I want to argue or state is that this angel that came down here, the second angel, this was the arrival. So I'm going to put a 2a. This is the arrival of the second angel when it first comes. When it comes here, this is not the arrival of the second angel. It's actually, she says the message is repeated. I'm saying this is not the arrival of the second angel, this is the empowerment. I'm going to call this the empowerment of the second angel. So if I do that, I'll take these arrows out. If you put them in, it's all good. And I'm going to do this. So can we see that we've got an identical pattern here? Yeah? We're building exactly the same model. Now we know this second angel that came down, this is where it gets a little bit problematic because you have to read carefully into Millerite history because Ellen White doesn't give us a lot of information. She says the second angel's message was first proclaimed when?
1837.
She doesn't say that. That says it on the chart. She doesn't say that in her writings, I don't believe. She says it's first preached in the summer of 1844. And sometimes we want to twist and turn that and make April the summer. But we know that's not good to do that. So I'm going to put here the second angel. And when we say the summer, we can mark July, August. And in a very simplistic way, we say this is the empowerment of the second angel. So this is the empowerment of the second angel in the summer of 1844. But we teach that the second angel arrived when? In the spring of 1844. So I'm going to connect these two like this. Can we see how this is an identical pattern? So if this is the empowerment of the second angel, and this is, the arrival, and this is the empowerment. Here's the empowerment. What should we expect to see? We should expect to see an arrival. Our message is to sort out these lines like this, to identify all the dates when these things happen. This is a generic one, obviously. These two are specific dates. These are specific dates. So I'm saying this 2E here is this Sunday law history, this Sunday law period, if we're okay with that. And this 2A is what?
You're looking for a date?
18.
What did you say the 2E was, sorry?
I just said it's the Sunday law history, a generic thing.
Date for the arrival of the second angel?
Yes.
But that was 9/11.
If we're okay with that?
Well,
Yeah?
you want to place this in the arrival and empowerment in the Sunday law time period?
No, here's the Sunday law.
Ah, okay.
Here's 9/11.
Okay.
Yeah?
When did you say the Millerite second angel arrived?
Oh, this is April
Spring, April.
the 19th,
Oh.
and I'll put July, August, depending on how you want to explain that. So hopefully we can see, using this principle, how we create the waymark of the arrival of the second angel in our history. It's not that straightforward to see. Just as it's not that straightforward to see the arrival of the second in Millerite history. You have to tease that out of the Spirit of Prophecy. This one's harder. But unless you know to look for it, you won't be able to find it. Okay, so I wanted to place that we need to understand how that works. So this is our full line. All we've done for us in this movement is to look at this history, and I'm going to take all these waymarks and bring them here So this is the close of probation. This is the second advent. This is Daniel 12:1. This is the Sunday law. And we'll do that in a minute. If this is the Sunday law and that's Daniel 12:1, what verse is this? Daniel 11, I heard 40. Did I hear 40? 41. 2.
45. Yeah.
45 or 44?
For sure, 44.
Okay. So we could figure out where 45 would go. I didn't want to make that point. Ellen White gives us these two dates. We're pretty sure about that. So we know, according to verse 40, the time of the end, shall the king of the south push against him. This here is Daniel 11 verse 40. This is verse 40, and we call that part A normally, and I'm calling this part B. This is 1989. So this one here is a brand new date, if I can use that kind of terminology, that we don't get from the spirit of prophecy. We created this waymark using this line, using all the methodology that we're familiar with, and reading that verse. Then we create another waymark, which is 9/11. So it's these two in blue that are basically connected to these two lines here. These two events. So at that level, this would be October 22nd, 1844. You could argue that quite strongly, quite effectively. So this is the line of Adventism at the end of the world. It can be understood at this level or at this level. Now, when we think about it at this level, remember, I've already argued that everything from here onward, I'm just going to put it this way. I'm just going to say it's the spirit of prophecy. And what I mean by that is we haven't teased this out, we haven't worked anything out, it's not some new light that we've got. This is all existing teaching. I'm not saying the verses themselves here, people understand that. So I'll put that in parenthesis, because people wouldn't understand Daniel 11:40 to 45. They'd go to other verses, which are the ones in Revelation. They'd go to Revelation 18 type verses to do that work. So all we've done is what's in the blue here. So I would argue that this is the line of Adventism, the complete line. And if I take all of these symbols and bring them down, I'm going to change this from ploughing to preparation, former rain, latter rain, harvest, and I'm going to call it the binding of. So it's a term that we're reasonably familiar with. Once we create that line, what we should really do is spend some time trying to understand what that line looks like and what it means, because I think there's some misunderstanding of that. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to take this out here. So let's think about some things here before we even come to a priest line, which is part of the question that Sister Chiquetta and Brother Daniel are asking. I've called this Adventism at the end of the world. The Bible doesn't use that symbol. The symbol that the Bible uses is the 144,000. So I'm saying this is the line of the 144,000. Spirit of prophecy gives us this. We have created this. And all we've done is basically, we could have said this was 1798, 1844, former rain. all that time period was the former rain. And now we've just brought those forward to the final generation, if you like, 144,000, the final generation line. This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So in a general way, if you're alive here, you'll be alive here. It's in the history of the lifetime of one generation. It doesn't extend at a multi-generational scale. Any questions so far? No, that's all straightforward. So there's a preparation. Who's being prepared? The 144,000. Former rain. What's the purpose of the former rain? To take a seed, to germinate it, to make it grow. Who's growing? 144,000. What's the purpose of latter rain? To bring you to maturity. Who's being brought to maturity? 144,000. Who's getting harvested? 144,000. This is all about the 144,000. If we're okay with that. If we put the seed here and we talk about living, the judgment, we talk about the final generation we're living, we're all physically alive, literally alive, yes? Here in this history, are we alive or dead? Okay? Are we literally alive? So we're literally alive, but we're spiritually dead. So we're dead here, and we're alive here. Are we okay with that? So when we talk about the judgment of the living, the first thing I want us to consider is we're not talking about literally living people. They are literally alive, but it's not that simple. It's to do with symbology. So when we talk about the judgment of the living, it has got a connection to symbology. They're symbolically alive. Does anybody not know what I mean by that? Because we were literally alive here, but we're spiritually dead, and you have to become alive here, symbolically alive, even though you're literally alive. You have to become symbolically alive. You have to waken up. Any questions on that you're not understanding that concept? So if you agree with that, then what makes you come alive here? The rain, the spirit, or the breath. So if we're a seed and we're using this model, it's this rain that's going to germinate, and this dormant seed is going to burst into life. If you went to Steps to Christ chapter 8, it would be the new birth. You're just born into the world. If we wanted to go to the line of Christ, this was baptism, Romans 6, Romans 7. Now you're born into the kingdom of heaven. So there's a birth or a spark of life that's being seen here. I think Brother Philip said wind. I think you said wind? Breath. So this is Ezekiel 37, that kind of language where the breath comes in. If you're going to use that concept, it's not just any old breath that's brought to view. This is the four winds that's brought to view in Ezekiel 37. You can tie this back to Revelation 7, and there we begin to introduce this idea of the sealing. So we're alive here, and now we're going to be dealing with the judgment that's connected to those who are alive. Not literally alive, but symbolically alive. I'm not going to develop that point any further, but it's really critical for us to think about it. Because if you're symbolically dead, if I were to ask you, what does Romans 3:9 mean? Don't know, have a look. 3:9 is. Romans 3:9. Paul has already proven something in his argument. By the way, do you know when he writes the book of Romans, not the date or anything, I mean, he's never even actually been there. This is his introductory letter to the Romans, like my credentials or letters of introduction, and look how he attacks them already. What then? Are we better than they? No, in no wise. For we have before proved, so I've proven to you, Romans, that both Jews and Gentiles, they are all under sin. So if you're under sin, in the context of what I've just spoken about, what condition are you in? You're dead. So, which group of people that are Jews are dead here at the end of the world? What do we call them? Laodiceans. We can't just say Adventists because we're Adventists. So we call them Laodiceans. So the reason why this is a life and death message is this. If you're dead in trespasses and sins, what does God consider you as? According to 3:9. The Jews and the Gentiles are in the same position, so you're just like a Gentile. If you picked up this morning, I said that we teach first the church, then the world. Remember that? First the church, then the world. And this is a misnomer. The world is not coming under judgment. Nothing about the world. I've changed that world to Babylon. Babylon by default is going to be destroyed. It has no hope. If you want to be saved and you're in Babylon, you have to come out of Babylon so that you can get into the investigative judgment and have an opportunity to get into heaven. You have to go through some hoops. Job interview, if you like. But first you have to come out before you can go through these steps. If you never come out, then you're doomed. There's no option. Agree with that? So, Romans 3:9, if you're a Laodicean, it's exactly the same condition as being in the world or a Gentile or being a Roman or a Greek in that context, or spiritually it's Babylonian. The church is not Babylon, but when God looks at it, it's in the same condition as Babylon. We're in the same mess. So if you're in that condition, when the judgment comes, what hope is there for you? None. Worse than no hope, because they're not even going to look at you. You're not even looked at. That's why this is a life and death message. It's not like you can be an Adventist over there, Laodicean, and if you're good, like a health reformer, God might say, well, you've got some brownie points, maybe we'll let you in if you're nice. They don't even open your record. You don't even get investigated unless you come into this movement. Say that again, in case you didn't get it the first time. Unless you come into this movement, you don't even have your books opened. As soon as you get to the time of the end and this judgment hour, work begins. If you can begin it back here, you go through all these steps. If you don't join the movement, you don't even be part of the investigation. It's automatic death warrant, period. And I think sometimes we don't realise that. Us on the movement, and you can become beguiled by thinking, well, they're nice people. If they don't accept it, maybe they'll get through somehow. Nobody will get through the judgment because they're not even considered. That's the implications of this concept of the judgment of the living. So coming back to this, now you're alive and you're going through the former rain, then the latter rain. So I'm saying this latter rain is when God's people begin to be investigated. It's the investigation, that's when it begins. Sister Tamina.
I was going to ask, how do we consider those people who came in the movement and they leave again?
Foolish virgins.
Well, are their books being opened? Are they being considered, or are they just going to be counted as Babylon and not even looked at?
Did they sign up?
They did. Or,
If your name's in the book of life, you signed up. So you're going to get checked.
so left and came back?
No, the other way.
Okay.
If you joined the movement, you signed up to it. If you signed up, you attested to being alive.
What about,
And with joining the movement, we don't speak about rebaptism. It's just if you've once believed in this movement.
What do you mean rebaptism?
Well, we're starting the work of rebaptism with
This
this.
movement's been around for a long time.
So it's not just about rebaptism, it's about believing in this message.
No, because rebaptism is connected to a waymark, a specific event, which is connected to organisation. You don't have to have left before or left afterwards. It's just another step.
Okay, yeah. Just to make sure.
okay, I forgot.
Okay, when as soon as you remember.
Oh, now I remember. It says something in the Spirit of Prophecy about when you're converted.
Louder, please.
When you're converted, your names are entered into the book of life.
Yes.
It doesn't say that you're joined to this movement, because I believe there's some people that are not in this movement that are converted, but they don't know yet.
My understanding is, as soon as you make a profession of faith, even if it's fake, even if it's not genuine, God takes you at your word. Just like Judas Iscariot. Judas was one of the 12, so he's part of Ephesus, the movement. So he signs up to this, and therefore he's going to be judged according to what he signs up to, even though I'll argue that he was never genuine in the first place. So he doesn't.
No, I'm talking about converted people. There are converted people that Ellen White talks about, or the Bible talks about, that when you are converted, your name enters into the book of life, and then you are judged.
So her question is that the Spirit of Prophecy talks about anybody who's converted, becomes a Christian, their name enters into the Lamb's Book of Life, and that's true. This is why this becomes problematic for people, because they say, I don't need to join your movement, I'm a paid up Seventh-day Adventist, and therefore I'm going to enter into the judgment, the investigative judgment, the judgment of the living. But I'm suggesting these lines teach otherwise. Even though they may think that they are, they're not. This is the problem that the Jews have in the time of Christ. They think they're paid up members of the church, and they start off like that here when they've got opportunity at the time of the end. But as time goes on, and you get to Matthew 23:38, it says your house is desolate. You're destroyed. Jesus is going to divorce you at some stage, and when you're divorced, you're in the world. So it's not as straightforward as we say, just because we're signed up Adventists, we're okay. And I think,
Well, I didn't mean that.
yeah,
I just meant that if you are converted, she said, then you will be judged.
if
And-
someone
and
doesn't,
they can leave. I mean, they can, God's going to judge them. That's my point.
if someone doesn't know the message, they're in they're afforded that luxury. But if you've heard this message and you've walked away from it,
Oh yeah, you're judged. Lost.
yeah. So I'm saying this is the investigative judgment. That's when it begins, there at the Sunday law. This is where you're born, you live this life, the books are open, and you go through this process. So this latter rain, which is coming down, who's the beneficiaries of that? So it's for the 144,000 this latter rain is. Now, often what we talk about is connected with the latter rain is the loud cry. And who's crying to whom? So I want the person who's crying is crying to this group of people. Who's crying to whom in this history, at this scale? Sister Brittany Loud?
4,000 cries to the world.
To?
The world.
Okay, so remember,
Those are in.
yeah,
those
it's
are
not
in
the world,
Yeah.
okay? It's, I'll say God's people.
Is it the Nathanims?
Yeah, so at this level I'm going to call them God's people. I was going to write the church, I've written the church, but this is God's people, and we're calling them Nethanims. Or the 11th hour workers, or what do we call them right from the very beginning? In our movement, not in our study.
Gentiles.
Edom, Moab, and
Oh,
Ammon.
yeah.
We don't talk about them much now. Edom, Moab, and Ammon. All the same thing. Because we've switched into sanctuary language so much now that we tend to use Nethinims. But this is Edom, Moab, and Ammon. This was the argument that we used to show that Daniel 11 verse 41 isn't just here, it stretches through this history. So you've all heard the studies, I think, where it says Edom, Moab, and Ammon shall escape out of his hand. Yeah? And then you'd hear this logic, because if you take the word escape, it's like a bar of soap, you squeeze and it slips out your hand. And the argument that we're going to use is it's showing that these people are already captive. Because if you escape from someone, say if you're walking along a road and you're here, are you free to walk on this path? You're free. And there's your assailant is behind you and he's running after you. Now if you ran faster than him, you'd escape, wouldn't you? But you were always free and you escaped. So escape, there's different types of escapes. Now, if I was in a prison and I make a hole in the wall and then I escape, the dynamic is different. And the escape that's in verse 41 is this one here. You're in captivity and you're going to escape out of captivity. Oh. So we're just going to pray to close Sabbath. So the latter rain is for the benefit of the 144,000, and in that history, the 144,000 cry to the Nethinims, 11th hour workers, Edom, Moab, and Ammon. And they're in a prison, and that cry allows them to escape. So that escaping is where they've left one home, one place, and they go to another place. So I'm saying they're being cut out of one environment into another environment. They're being cut out of the world, if I can explain it that way. So as soon as we start using the concept of cut out, I'm saying this is harvest. Now, at this scale, all of this is invisible. You can't see this harvesting, this cutting out. All you can see is the latter rain and the loud cry. Because when it comes to harvest, the harvest is here. All of this is not visible. Now, the problem is, when Ellen White is going to give us this history, when we have taught Edom, Moab, and Ammon with this logic, but escaping out of a prison house, what we've done, I'm suggesting, is we've mixed two lines together inadvertently. Because what we're saying, without perhaps realizing it, is that this is the harvest. We're harvesting Edom, Moab, and Ammon out of the world. We're not saying to them, get ready to come out, because we're going to deal with you here. You can come out here. Their history is all done and dusted here as they come out. Now, without discussing the issue of whether they die or live or whatever, that's separate to this issue, but their harvest is here. That's the point I want to make. That's what that loud cry is. When you go from one place, the house, a prison house, to a free house. You go from one place to another. So that's what's happening in the Sunday law history. The Nethinims, Edom, Moab, and Ammon are being cut out of Babylon. The world, if you like.
That's not the harvest.
That is their harvest. Being cut out, I'm saying it's harvest.
So does it go in the next line?
No. That's why I'm saying this information here has been essentially invisible to us. We've not seen this in the movement when we first discussed. This concept here, Edom, Moab, and Ammon, 20 years old? 22 years old? If you go to 1996, that's 22 years old. Yeah, that's when Timely End magazine's put out. So this is 22-year-old information that we have here. And what we were identifying is that when they're cut out, that's the definition of a harvest. That's what I'm suggesting.
So you're saying it's wrong to have it there?
No, I'm saying it's correct. Other people are saying that it's incorrect. I'm teaching that these people are cut out here. But when we first taught it, we wouldn't teach it in the way they're cut out. We just taught that they leave Babylon. We never use the word harvest when it comes to Edom and Ammon.
Well, I thought you were teaching that the...
Before, when I say we, I mean before, 10, 15, 20 years ago. This language that I'm using today was not a language that we used before in our movement. We never ran an agricultural model and overlaid it on our model. We used rain, but we never used it in connection with harvest or ploughing in this definitive, systematic fashion, binding off. We never used to think about things like that. We just said, it's the latter rain. Latter rain is the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit's being poured here. And what you can tend to think is that the Holy Spirit that's being poured onto here is for the benefit of Edom, Moab, and Ammon. They're the ones that are receiving the latter rain. And I'm saying they're not. The people who are receiving the rain, the 144,000, that rain is connected to a message, and the message directed to Edom, Moab, and Ammon. It influences and affects them, but it's not their rain. They're not being rained upon. What's happening to them is they're being harvested. But we never looked at this from a perspective of harvest for them. We just said, oh, they're leaving Babylon and they're joining us, which is correct. Everything that we've taught on this subject is correct. But what I'm saying is that my understanding is that what we were describing then is their harvest. And you can't see a harvest on this line. The harvest is here. So let me clarify that so that, let me take that out. This is harvest, and I'm going to put 144 here. Because you agreed before, preparation of the 144, former rain for the 144, latter rain for the 144, harvest for the 144. Okay? So if we're okay with that, here, all of this, let me box all of this off. So I'm going to distill all of that, and I'm going to call them Nethinims. If we're okay with Nethinims. So this is the history of the Nethinims, and I'm saying this is the harvest of the Nethinims. Let me get my lines.
So when did they receive the latter rain?
Okay, so we're going to discuss that in a second. Because, so I'm taking this here, like that. Yeah, I'll do it this way. I'll put harvest 144 and I'll put it here. Harvest Nethinims. So, if you accept that this is where they're being cut out, where they're being harvested, if this is the harvest of the Nethinims, then you have to ask the question, where's their latter rain? Where's their former rain? Where's the preparation going on? Where all of that is. And you can't see it on this line. It's not visible. That's why we never noticed it. That's why you need to go to this big line, as Brother Jim said, just draw the big line. When you do that, this is not easy. You don't see it because it's not there, because it's the latter rain. What we did, I think incorrectly, is we began to mix dispensations. And what we did is that, I'll show you what we did a few years ago. If this is our line, and this is midnight cry, this is what we used to call it, and then we said this is Raphia and Panium. First it was this, then it was this. This was, I'll say 2016-17, the very end. Let me just call it 2017, that's when it really hit this movement, 2017. This was, I think, around late 2015, maybe the summer of 2015, where we developed Midnight Cry. if you were in those studies, this is time dilation. They call it time dilation then. That's how they started talking about it. Yes. So first it was like this time dilation, then they called it the binding off. And what we did is that we knew this is the binding off, which is harvest. And what we ended up doing is we said, in this history, there's a latter rain here. And I'm saying, just the agricultural model will tell you that's wrong. So when we did that, we tripped up on ourselves. And you can't have a latter rain in a harvest. But look what you've got here, a latter rain in a harvest. So this idea has already been built into our message, but we've not unpackaged it properly until now. Now not means today, but now in the recent 18 to 24 months. Now we've begun to address this issue when we have priests, Levites and Nethinims. So I'm going to leave that one for the moment. So I'll put that one in parenthesis. And it's this harvest here that we want to deal with. But so I want to field a couple of questions. Brother Paul, you have your hand up?
I think we like to put our theories in forms. But I think if you're looking at agriculture, there's a harvest all the time. There's always something becoming ripe and harvested. And I'll tell you why I say that. Read your bulletin. And think about what she's saying there.
Oh, sorry. No, that's fine. I thought you were going to say more. Because I agree with what you said.
Because, well, the inhabitants of the world under Satan's leadership are binding up in bundles ready to be burned. We have no time, not a moment to lose. The judgments of God are in the land, and you can see that now. And those who stand obstinate, unconvinced through the warning that God sends, will be bound in bundles ready to be burned. Let ministers and church members go forth into the vineyard. They will find their harvest wherever they proclaim the forgotten truths of the Bible. Missionaries, men and women, are needed. They will find those who accept the truth and take their position beside their teacher to win souls to Christ. That is an ongoing harvest. It isn't just here. It's ongoing.
Yep, I agree with that.
As we accept what God sends to us.
Sister Brittany?
I understand the latter rain, loud cry being before the close of probation for the Nethinims. But I'm only understanding that independent of your big line and the 144,000 being harvested after the close of probation. I don't understand the purpose of putting the harvest after.
Well, if you agree that this is the latter rain, you claim the harvest doesn't come after the rain.
Yeah, but for the Nethinims, we're saying it's simultaneous.
No, I put that in parentheses. I'm saying we haven't noticed that. All we've done is this logic here. I'll take this bit out here. We've taught this. That you give a message to the Nethinims. You agree that they come out of Babylon here, don't you? That's the warning. Come out of Babylon before you get to this event here, because it's too late. You agree with that? Mm-hmm. So them coming out of Babylon, what are you suggesting that is?
I'm not suggesting anything. I just didn't understand why. I don't know my question. Never mind. I don't know what I meant. I know it's not a 44,000. I don't know what I meant. Never mind.
Okay, Sister Bronwyn, Brother Jason, Brother Theodore.
If I'm understanding you correctly, your line that you laid out there, that's the 144,000, and then that little subcontext there, that's kind of the work they're doing, but it's not really their line. They've got their line, and now here's their little side job.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
And that little side job, when you start looking at what that job is and what that job does, you begin to say, hold on, this little job that they're doing here is a harvesting job. And that harvesting job doesn't fit in this line. So then we have to start thinking about this group of people, because this line is not about this group. It's about the 144,000. Yes, Brother Jason.
So they're part of the 144,000, the Nethinims?
No, nothing to do with 144,000. Two separate groups, nothing to do with each other. Brother Theodore.
Well, just an example back a couple of years ago in mixing up the lines. So we put the midnight and the midnight cry before the Sunday law with the priests, right? And so we were putting the Nethinims even before the Sunday law. But are the Nethinims going through the Sunday law? You know, now, because now that's all changed, dealing with the Nethinims, how we understood them, at least the way I understood them. I understood that, between the midnight cry and the Sunday law, the Nethinims were being called out of Babylon, and they would stand with us at the Sunday law. But now we have their harvest is after the Sunday law, which is how I thought it should be, but that's not what we were doing.
So what I'm trying to do is lay out my thoughts on this, and to get direction, feedback, thoughts from yourselves, to come to a place where we coalesce and we say, not only we all agree, but we all understand what we are believing. Sorry, I did interrupt you. I didn't mean to.
It never made sense to me that the Nethinims stood at the Sunday law, because then their probation would have closed and there would be no need to have a work after the Sunday law, was my thinking back at the time. But would you say that that's part of the problem with that?
Yes.
Mixing up the lines.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other problem is because I always live at a distance, I'm not always able to keep up with all the nuances of that is happening. And some of the development of those lines in the early days, I wasn't there when that was happening or keeping up with. So I missed some of those steps. So the way you've explained it, I'm saying, yeah, that was a mixing up of the lines.
Because it was the joining of the two sticks, which had to occur between midnight cry and the Sunday law, which didn't really make sense to me. There's a work being done for the Nethinims then, but it's not their harvest until after the Sunday law.
Sister Christy, Brother Nathan, Sister Brittany.
I don't know if I'm going to articulate my question very well, but from what I see in the illustration, it looks like the harvest of the 144,000 that's a different harvest than what you've got for the. So.
Yes, different harvest.
In my mind, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you've got the you've got the former rain, latter rain, but if you just went down like this, you'd have the 144, then the priest would be here, and then the 11th hour workers. So it goes kind of like this.
Yes.
But it still lines up for you've got the former rain, the latter rain, because each line has to go through a former rain, latter rain.
Yes.
Sunday law. Okay. So then that's what I'm saying. But the harvest is different at a different time for the 144,000.
When you did that cascading, just you showed me now.
Right.
What was that? Your 2 feet. Your hands were like this. What was it in between them, for one group when you just did that?
Like the form.
What I thought I saw you doing was something like this.
Yes.
What is that?
Well. You've got the plowing, you've got the former rain, the latter rain, and then the harvest. But for each line, it's going to line up. So you have the former rain, and here you're going to have a former rain.
Okay, so I'll do that. I'll call that former rain.
No, visually, this is the way I'm seeing it.
And then there's a former rain, and then there's a former rain, and then there's a former rain. Like that?
Right. And so each one, you're going to have a former rain, and then the latter rain is going to go down. And the first line is going to be the 144,000. The second line is going to be the priests. And then
yes.
The Levites, and then the...
So the only one that's different, if I call this the priests, Levites and Nethinims, this one here, the 144,000, doesn't cascade like that, because this is the big line. So if I just took that one out for the moment, that's exactly correct. You're going to do the former rain cascading, the latter rain will cascade after it, then the harvest will cascade. They all cascade like that.
So the priests and the Levites have kind of the same line.
They're similar, but they're not
Similar.
identical.
Okay, but, okay, okay.
You want to say any more?
No, I'm
No?
good.
Brother Nathan?
Well, I was just going to elaborate on what Theodore was talking about and the misconception that we had back then. Do you want to do that? If it's a misconception?
I don't mind, because I wasn't part of that. I can't answer to it. I will just be listening and not, so I can't comment on it.
The idea was that the Sunday law is a close of probation for the United States, and then progressively every other nation that came afterwards. So for that reason, then the Sunday law, or the testing period of the Nethinims had to be beforehand. So that was the logic behind it.
Sister Brittany?
So I know this is the big line with the 144,000, but what are the implications of this boxed in section and the three smaller lines that we have?
So we'll deal with that in a second. Just make sure that we're all happy at that scale. So I want to add one more piece of information before we even looked at this. I just want to make sure that we're happy with this, that this is the harvest of the 144,000. That's what's being identified there. Brother Daniel, then Brother Philip.
That would make more sense for me. So when you get to the lines of the Nethinims, the loud cry that they have during the harvest time is actually the 144,000 giving the loud cry for them. It's not the Nethinims, they're not giving any loud cry. They're just receiving this loud cry.
Remember, this is like, we're like in a kindergarten class. You know, the most advanced studies that we can do are really at kindergarten level. They're really childish, like simple cartoons. So the way we can explain it is yes. That when you get into that, right into the depths of that, the subtleties become more complex. I'm not arguing that a Nethinim joins the movement and he sits down and doesn't do anything. So they're going to join, but at this simple level, these are giving a message and these are receiving. I'm not doing what happens to them and how they join us. Because we don't do that when we come to the Levites. We had the priests and the Levites, and we forget that the priests are overlapping with the Levites who need identical work, going through the same experience as them. Brother Philip.
So what you have drawn there is the line of Adventism, or the 144,000, and I agree it makes sense to me, but maybe you could elaborate more on one part, and the part is here between the Sunday law and the crows of probation is the latter rain for the 144,000 when they give the loud cry for the not the world but the Nethinims, okay, and they are harvested when they come in. So what for me, I want more explanation on how come the harvest for the Nethinims is before the harvest of the 144,000.
Okay, so
apparently,
yeah.
Apparently, I don't say it is, but
it is.
Okay.
Before we do that, let me show you one more thing. I did hear Matthew 13. Okay. If you go to verse 20, let me check. I can't remember what verse. Let's go to Matthew 13. The parable is verse 24 to 30, but I want to go to verse 38. 13:38. And 13:38, beginning from verse 37, Jesus is going to decode the parable for us. Verse 24 says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a man which sowed good seed in his field." So I'm saying the field equals what? The kingdom. We okay with that? Yeah. Kingdom of heaven. Jesus is going to explain what the field is. What is the field in verse 38? Okay, so it's really important that, because what is Ellen White going to do? Christ Object Lessons. The first thing she's going to do, she's going to throw us off guard. She's going to give us the wrong direction. She's going to say, yes, the world's fine, but it's not the world. She's going to say it's the church in the world. Not the church of the world, the church in the world. Because there's a church in heaven. Yeah, we know there's a church in heaven, there's a church on earth. She's then going to trip us up even more. Not this subject, another one. That the church triumphant lives where? In heaven, not on earth. And then sometime or another, we're going to join the church triumphant, which is the church in heaven. So, we have to... It's like an assault course going through Spirit of Prophecy. We will have to get through it and work our way through it. We can do it and it's manageable. So we're going to take what Jesus says, not trying to ignore the Spirit of Prophecy, because I'm saying the first thing is, if she says to the church in the world, what's she doing? She's making application. That's not where we should be at the big scale. Okay? So here we are. We've got the world is the field. This is the line of the 144,000. Or, I want to give it another name, the final generation. So, here's these beautiful plants, and what are they called? In the parable, they're called wheat. What are we going to call them? So, we're going to call them 144,000. Then an enemy comes and sows tares. I'll do them a different colour. And what are these? Okay, so they're tares. So these are wheat, these are tares. So what label are we going to put for these tares? What are they? Sorry?
Wicked.
The wicked?
The world.
The world? Sorry?
Children of the wicked one.
The children of the wicked one. It's straight from the chapter.
Foolish virgins.
You think they're virgins?
No.
Foolish virgins.
No.
Yeah, but you think they're virgins.
They're hypocrites.
Yeah.
No.
Anyone else? I don't think they're virgins. I think, I'll use the word world.
But the world's not the people of God?
No,
The church?
nor are these people. An enemy put them in. They're the agents of Satan. We'll use another one.
They're Judas.
They're just not converted.
No, they're not Judas, because you're coming to a different scale. You're saying the field is the church. Jesus says the field is not the church, it's the world. Where does Judas live in this story? Where is Judas in this story? If you're going to put him here. He's there in the 140. He's in the church bit.
He's the wheat.
Yeah, he's in that story. He's not there. I'll change this to Babylonian if you prefer. So, this is the Babylonians, and this is the church. Okay? So you've got the church and the world. You go through all of this. We're being prepared. We're sown. Now we begin to germinate and grow. What's happening to the world? Exactly the same thing. This former rain is being poured upon the world. Have we not seen that from 9/11? Isn't the world changed? Have they not begun to grow? So at the Sunday law, things are going to escalate. Now they're going to ripen. And we're going to ripen too. So then you get to the harvest. So in the harvest of the what? What's been the harvest of the what? Not the priest, someone said it. The earth, the world. So the earth of the world is going to be harvested. So there's two groups here. Jesus is going to come on a cloud with his sickle, and what's he going to do? Who's he going to harvest? Everyone's going to get harvested.
First the world and then the...
So he's going to take these people who are hooked onto the world, because we're embedded in this world, aren't we? Yeah? We call it what in that history? Earthiness. So he's going to cut loose our earthiness, and we're going to float up to heaven, go to the heavenly Ghana, and who's left? All those people on the earth who are going to be burnt and destroyed.
Where is Judas? Where is
But
Judas?
Judas isn't in this story, because this is the story of the church and the world. So at that scale, you can't see Judas. Judas doesn't run in this story, and I think that's what we struggle with. that we're looking for a Judas and you can't see that.
Advanced to maturity.
You can't even do that. You can't even say that he killed himself because he's not visible at this scale, because this is the world. This is not the church. If you did the church, then you could put Judas and John, but because we're not. So this harvest here is the harvest of Adventism, the harvest of the SDAs, the harvest of the 144,000 final generation. It's when we get cut off from planet Earth and we go to the heavenly Ghana. That's what is being identified here. There's no one else left. You've either got God's church or Babylon. It's all decided by this stage here. And so the Nethinims are not even in this story. We're being cut out of the world here. That's what that harvest is, just as Jesus says. Sister Bronwyn and then Sister Tamina.
So the harvest, so the second coming is really only for the 144,000 on the level.
Exactly.
He's just coming for his 144,000?
Yes.
He's dealt with everybody else previously?
The living saints.
But he'll call
So the story
all
of
the righteous.
the story of the general resurrection is another layer onto this. Remember, this is just kindergarten, because then we have this issue about first fruits and then the general harvest. So this harvest here has got first fruit harvest, which is 144,000 of the world, then the general resurrection. So it has these sophistications in this, but at a general level, I'll put it here. This is the harvest of the earth, where you've got these two groups, called the wheat and the tares.
Glorious holy mountain.
Sorry?
It's the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Just both.
Yes, there's various ways of explaining that. Sister Tamina.
Since looking at the Nethinims, we established that the loud cry is the cutting out of them, the harvesting. I wonder if there's a loud cry between the close of probation and the second advent.
You already know that there is.
Is that the day and the hour?
Sorry?
Is that the day and the hour?
You just simply at that level, yeah. I'm sure that's overly simplistic, but there's this cry that's many waters that gives the day and the hour of this event.
So then this loud cry is actually a prediction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what we're doing right now. 2019.
Yeah. Brother Philip?
So now I see that the big line that you have drawn is the world, so to say, that the biblical primary application. And when you were mentioning the harvest of the Nethinims during the latter rain, you were basically snacking in another line, right? That was another line.
I've snuck in another line, and I'm showing you that line has been there from the very beginning, but we didn't see it, because you can't see it at this scale. And what we did in our movement is we mixed up lines.
And you were making an application, basically, right? When you were
Let me say this. Ellen White says that the Millerites were wrong about the first angel. What were they wrong about? What was their message? Christ is going to come. 1844, 1798. This is the Millerites. They're the first angel. And they're saying Jesus is coming back here, which makes it an E. Executive judgment, but they were wrong. It's actually an A. This is the Millerites. This is the spirit of prophecy and God. So we have made the same mistake. Before I explain our mistake, let me deal with their mistake. If they had said, in 46 years, Jesus, invisible to you, is going to move from here to here, from the holy place to the most holy place, in 46 years, on October 22nd, what would people have said? We don't care. So what? it would have done nothing. No one would have been scared. And they said, by the way, when he does that, what's going to happen? And we would have said, now, when he shifts, now it's time to get ready, seriously, because now he's going to open your books and you've got to be sorted out. Because what's the first thing he's going to do in 1844 when he shifts place?
Investigate.
Whom?
The dead.
The dead. And they say, well, that's good, because we don't know how long it's going to take, so we've still got more time after October 1844. So if they'd given that message, it would have just fallen flat on its face. Nobody would have been scared. Nobody would have been worried. However, God wanted them to give that message. I'm not God. We're not God. I don't understand the mind of God, because on one level, if they had done it properly, His will would have been done and it would have worked according to His will. They don't do it properly. They make up this mess, but in the mess, they create a movement that has the effect that God wanted them to have. It kicks the fear of God into the people, and they get scared and they change their lives. It starts from fear and goes into love. I'm not trying to labour the point of fear, but it's a fearful message, so that they get to hear it and it's right. I do want to say, because of their mistake, you only get 50 people surviving after 46 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. In that history, I think it was hundreds of thousands. I don't know what millions it turns to in our history. I mean, this was a well-financed operation, and if you look at the cost-benefit ratio for 50 people and divide that by how much money, it's a lot of money per person, because Adventists like doing that when they do these evangelistic campaigns. They spent a lot of money for 50 people, and I'm saying if they'd got it right, maybe it would have been more. I don't know. It is what it is. But they made that mistake. Brother Paul.
It was for a test for those people, just like it was for the people in Noah's time.
Yes, but Noah doesn't make any mistakes. Noah is spot on everything that he says. The Millerites aren't. Millerites make mistakes. Clearly, they make mistakes.
Right.
I'm not trying to.
The only issue I'm saying is, yeah, the people might say it won't matter, but it was testing their hearts. It did matter.
I totally agree with that. I'm not trying to get into the moral argument. It's like if someone said to me, 1888, where's Islam? The Sunday law's about to hit, the Blair Bill's about to come in. If God's people have got their act together, where's Islam? And I'm saying, maybe Islam wouldn't have come up. Who knows? I don't know how God is able to recycle verses, fulfill history in a way that we don't understand. He's able to make everything work. And He does that here. And Ellen White's going to say exactly what Brother Paul said, that it was designed to test. Now, when I say, to me, design means God wanted it to be done that way. And I'm saying, how could He have wanted it to be done that way? He tells that angel, tell those people down there, investigative judgment. When he gets down to earth and whispers into Miller's ears, Miller says, I don't like investigation, I'm going to call it executive. Just doesn't listen. So I can't say it was God's will for that to happen, because it just doesn't seem right. But God's will gets done in this history. So I'm just making an observation. I'm not making a comment on the rights and wrongs of that. I'm saying it is what it is. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we have done the same thing. And again, this is not an accusation against this movement or anyone. It is what it is. The Sunday law here is the investigative judgment. And for years, we've called it what? Close of probation. Now, I can assure you, when Adventists who say this is the investigative judgment of the Sunday law, what does it allow you? More time. And that is not false, because this is probationary time. Now, you could argue about it's the former rain and latter rain, and Ellen White has some conditional clauses in that. I'm not arguing that. But you're still in probationary time. Close of probation means end of probation, and that is not the end of probation. But we taught it that it was the end of probation. Can you imagine this movement says the Sunday law is coming, but don't worry, because that's when you're going to be investigated, and close of probation is sometime afterwards. People would have done what the Millerites were faced with, they would have said, well, that's good. We've got some time to get ready. That's what our church already teaches. Our church teaches essentially truth, if I can say it at that level. They say when you get to the Sunday law, investigative judgment, that's correct. You've still got probationary time. They may be wrong in some concept or some idea. Here we come and we say, no, close the probation. And it's a fearful message, and it scared all of you enough to be here. So it works. That's all I'm saying. It works. So the working of that was designed in the same way as the Millerite, was to test people's hearts, to see where they were and where they are not. So this line and our movement and its message has all been laid out before us, and the way it's panned out is how it should have panned out. If we had dared give a message that said Sunday law is investigative judgment, we would not have even had a movement. None of us would be here. We'd just be conservative Adventists, because they all really essentially believe that, even with these warped ideas. So we have to do this, call this close of probation, but the difference between us and the Millerites is we understand what's happened, and we've corrected ourselves. This angel has come down and it said, by the way, this is the investigative judgment. We know that now, and we're not teaching that it's the close of probation at this scale. Sister Tamina, Brother Paul.
Technically, yes, probation is still open at the Sunday law letter rain starts. However, can we say that, you gotta be careful, because Ellen White says the latter rain won't make up for the neglect you've done in the former rain. Meaning, if you haven't done your preparation, you're out. So technically,
You're out of what?
You won't make it.
You're gone.
You're gone from where? Let both grow together.
go there,
You don't go anywhere. You're still there.
I'm just saying, if you don't get prepared in the former rain, the latter rain won't make up for it. So you're already done and dusted.
I understand
In
your
other words,
argument.
it's a close of
That's
probation
another lie.
for those who know, but do not
So
choose.
technically,
I understand
probation
your
is
argument.
open.
I understand your argument. But to me, if we don't run a line through with a theme, we can get into problems.
I get that.
I'll give one example of this. This is from Sister Tessie's studies. So, I'll do it in blue, so it's separate. She's running a reform line. This is from 1989. I just call it to the second Advent, which for the priest would be Panium, if you're okay with that. And her theme is information. And people have argued, well, that can't be correct, because there's going to be bloodshed somewhere. We taught bloodshed, so that can't be right. Or they'll say, but what about the bloodshed? And my response would be, what about it? We're not talking about a line of bloodshed. If you want to talk about a line of bloodshed, then you develop a line that takes you from here and shows you how the bloodshed is going to happen. You can't just pick a random battle and a random event and say, there was bloodshed there, so there's going to be bloodshed here. We've got waymarks in our line which are not tied together. They're separate and distinct waymarks, and we should run a theme or a narrative or a story to connect them together, and we're not good at that. And that's why you'll see people today who have got lines, and this is just a hypothetical one. They'll do things like this, like a sort of a 25-20 line, and they'll get dates and numbers, and they'll put one here and maybe one here, and they'll come up with something, and they'll say 2020 as an example. And I'm going to say, well, that's good, but what's your storyline? Tell me what 2020 is based upon a narrative that runs and connects all of these together, because you don't have just 3 waymarks, you have a number of them. And the answer is they don't have one. And it's important for us to realise that. So I'm not telling Sister Tamina off or anything, but what I am saying is When you say it's all done and dusted and kind of and like here, what you end up doing is you end up fighting against the reform line, because this is a reform line that's using this concept of agriculture, and on any metric this is not a close of probation. You can't identify it as, because if you want to identify it as a close of probation, then you're going to have to develop a model that says that this is a close of probation. If that's a close of probation, what is that? And what is the one before it? And how does that line work that you have? And it becomes, if not impossible, it becomes complex. And I haven't seen people do that, because what you're going to be forced to do is do line upon line, or take multiple lines and juggle with them all at once when you do that. And I think it's far simpler to take a singular concept, a singular line, and run it through. And then, when we become familiar with that, then look at some complexities or nuances, or add another concept on. Because as soon as I just did a simple one, which has been in our movement for 22 years, many of you are saying, and how does that work? And I'm saying, we've been teaching this for 22 years. Why is it such a surprise? That's all I want to say just about that issue, because I want to deal with that in a minute. But I want us to just to think about this. The fact that she says, after I don't know how many hours, like 15 hours of material, that this is all about information, we say that can't be correct because there's other things. The other things don't negate this. They add on to it. And what we're not good at, as I've said, I'm repeating myself, when we want to put here, and I'm just going to put blood or prison, I'm saying develop a line that shows that, not just a singular event. And that would build on top of this. It wouldn't be antagonistic toward it. But you can't say, well, we've missed some pieces out, because that's not what the remit of what she was doing. And my remit is not saying that there's a close of probation there. I understand the arguments that you have, but you can't use this line to do that. You have to create another line, other arguments. And because we mix them, I think we begin to struggle with how things work. So this is a problem that we face in our movement, especially now that people are generating lines, they've got waymarks and they don't know what they are, which is fine. I'm not saying that they should, it's a preliminary work. But you did hear Elder Jeff today say, you know, as we have opened up ourselves to the possibility of time setting, back as of this year, June 2018, people are now looking at this, but unbeknownst to us, someone's been looking at this for 2 years and has developed a line that not only has the dates, but has a sophisticated argument, it's from my observation of it, of how to draw, you know, if the way I like to think about it, if these are needles with eyes here, you're basically just threading a story that runs through them. You need to thread a story, and you know the information thing was just one thread. She had multiple threads, which is what gives its veracity to the date that she's setting. It's not to say that 18, 19, 20, 21 dates that people are coming up with are not correct, but it's how to identify what they are, and that is what we're not good at, because we have so many stories, we just kind of like throw them in and hopefully shake them around and something good's going to happen, and it often doesn't. So, okay, I want to summarize. I know we haven't got here, but if we can at least all agree at this level that this is the line of the final generation, we developed this line all the way back from a line that was 1798 to the Second Advent. And all we've done is taken the line of Adventism and brought it down to the final generation line. We can easily tag 1798 and 1989 together, and I'm saying at this level, 9/11 and 1844 tie up. There's a former reign, and then there's a latter reign in that line. And we've got the same dynamic here. This bit here, according to the spirit of prophecy, is identical to what we have here. All we've done is just started our line at the time of the end for the final generation, hence these two waymarks. That's all this movement was really created for, if you think about it, to explain and develop these two waymarks. And it's taken us 29 years so far just to do that. It just shows you the complexity and the difficulty of our stubborn hearts and trying to extricate ourselves out of Laodicea. 29 years to get two waymarks sorted out. And the rest of it is details. I understand the last 2 years we've been doing details. So once we see that, the latter rain here, all of this is all for the 144. Here at 9/11, at this scale, an enemy came and planted these Babylonian seeds in this field and then grew two types of plant, the world and the church. At this stage, then they began to ripen, and at the end, there's a harvest of the earth. God's people are taken to the heavenly Ghana, and the people that are left are going to be put into bundles and burnt. I'm not arguing the order of it. I'm not talking about the general resurrection, the special resurrection. It's just that simple, but it's quite profound. And when you see that line, and we can conceptualize what that means, much of what we need to know about the priests, Levites, and Nethinims becomes relatively easy to understand. Right from the very beginning, if you mark 1996, 22 years ago, we have this story. The latter rain is for the 144,000. I put that in parentheses because we didn't emphasize that. We've got the loud cry. We would teach that the church goes to the world. We used to call them Edom, Moab, and Ammon then. Now we call them 11th hour workers or the Nethinims. And they're going to say, come out. Daniel 11 verse 41. They're going to escape out of his hand through the concept of slipperiness. I'm saying when you leave that kingdom and come into this kingdom, just like here, you leave the kingdom on earth, you go to the kingdom of heaven. Same thing is happening here. They leave the world of Babylon and they come into the world of the church. This is their harvest. We never used to call it a harvest. We never conceptualized it that way because we didn't think about the agricultural line in the way that we do now. We didn't just have the visibility. We didn't have that light. So I'm saying this is the harvest of the Nethinims. And as soon as you start seeing this, then you have to say, hold on, how come this harvest is before this harvest? And that's what we then would have to explain. We'd have to develop this line of the harvest of the Nethinims and see how it would cascade back with the latter rain, former rain, and preparation. And once we get these two, the 144,000 and the Nethinims, once we got those two straightened out, we can then explain the relationship between the priests and the Levites. And maybe we'll continue this to explain how we developed those three lines, the Nethinims, the priests, and the Levites. So we'll stop there. Maybe we could do it in tomorrow's class because it's a Sunday and people aren't at work, so maybe more of us can come tomorrow. I think my class is being shifted. It's after breakfast, is it? What? So I'm here for 9:30. So Sister Tessie's doing the morning class. It's her last class. She's going to tie in all of her thoughts together. Then it's breakfast, and I'm taking the next class. And we'll try and continue this. So if you live far, maybe you can come for breakfast or bring your breakfast or something. If that's okay, then let's pray. Heavenly Father, I want to ask and pray for a blessing that you might help us to settle into these truths, not just to accept them passively, but to think about them and to test them if they're correct or not. We ask and pray, Lord, for guidance and wisdom, that you might help us to see not only the truths of this information that we have, but also the presentation that have been given concerning the Midnight Cry message here these past 2 weeks. We ask, Lord, for a blessing and for wisdom In the precious holy name of Jesus. Amen.